The air in Liam's office was cool and still, a carefully curated emptiness. It was a space designed for thought, not for show. Polished concrete floors, a single black oak desk, and a vast window overlooking the city's sprawling, chaotic heart. It was onto this serene canvas that Catherine and her lawyer, a man named Arthur Abernathy, painted a garish splash of entitlement. Catherine, his ex-wife, stood as if she still owned the room, her Chanel suit a silent, screaming testament to a world Liam had gladly left behind. Abernathy, a man whose ambition was visible in the expensive sheen of his shoes and the predatory stillness in his eyes, held a leather-bound portfolio like a weapon. They thought they had him. The confidence radiated from them, a cloying perfume of presumed victory. They had read the articles, seen the headlines in financial journals and architectural digests. The Aura Project, Liam Calloway's $100 million vision, reshapes urban living. They had seen the number, $100 million, and it had acted like a summons, pulling them from their world of glittering surfaces and quiet judgments straight to his door. Liam, Catherine began, her voice a finely tuned instrument of condescending familiarity. You look, well, this place is very minimalist. The word was meant as an insult, a suggestion of lack, but it fell flat in the quiet dignity of the room. Abernathy stepped forward, placing the portfolio in the corner of Liam's desk with a soft, definitive thud. Mr. Calloway, I am Arthur Abernathy. I represent your ex-wife, Catherine Sterling. He used her new married name like a subtle jab. We're here to discuss a matter of significant financial oversight concerning your divorce settlement. Liam leaned back in his chair. He didn't look at the portfolio. He looked at Catherine. He saw the same woman he had married, the woman who had measured his worth in dinner party invitations and the brand of his watch. He saw the woman who had looked at his dreams and seen only a frivolous waste of time. And behind his calm, measured gaze, a universe of knowledge swirled, a secret that made their entire performance a tragic comedy. They saw a man who had gotten lucky, a simple architect who stumbled into a fortune after she had left him. They didn't know that their visit was not a surprise. It was an inevitability he had been planning for, with the same meticulous precision he used to design his buildings for over 3 years. This moment, this confrontation, was the final keystone in an arch of his own making. Within the hour, their world of arrogant certainty would be dismantled, brick by painful brick. If you've ever felt underestimated, if you've ever had someone look at your passion and call it a hobby, then you know the quiet fire that was burning in Liam's chest. It wasn't the fire of anger, but the steady, white-hot flame of vindication. We're about to watch a masterclass in quiet power. So, do me a favor. Tap that like button if you're ready for it. And I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Let me know in the comments below. Now let's get back to it. The chess match was about to begin, and Liam Calloway had been waiting for his turn to move. Abernathy opened his portfolio, the practiced movement of a man who enjoyed delivering bad news. As you know, Mr. Calloway, you recently came into a significant financial windfall. $100 million to be precise, from the sale and initial licensing of the Aura Project to a Singaporean development firm. He slid a sheaf of papers across the polished oak. They were printouts of the news articles, as if Liam himself might be unaware of his own success. I'm aware of my own projects, Mr. Abernathy, Liam said. His voice was even, betraying nothing. It was the voice he used with contractors who told him something was impossible. Calm, patient, and unyielding. Of course you are, Abernathy said with a tight, unpleasant smile. The legal issue here is one of asset concealment during a divorce proceeding. A project of this magnitude, this complexity, could not have been conceived, designed, and funded in the 18 months since your divorce from my client was finalized. It is, by any reasonable legal definition, a marital asset. an asset you fraudulently failed to disclose. Catherine, who had been examining a small, intricate architectural model on a nearby shelf, finally turned. The model was of a single, elegant tower, spiraling upwards with delicate, leaf-like balconies. It was the centerpiece of the Aura project. "Don't be ridiculous, Arthur," she said, though she wasn't defending Liam. "He wasn't capable of hiding anything. He's just not that clever." She looked at Liam, her eyes sweeping over him with a familiar, dismissive chill. "You must have gotten lucky, found a backer who didn't know any better. But the idea, the work, that started when you were with me, when I was supporting your career." There it was, the narrative she had constructed for herself. The one where she was the silent benefactor of his modest corporate success, the long-suffering wife of a man with trivial little hobbies. Liam's gaze drifted to the model she had just gestured at. He remembered the first version of that model, smaller, cruder, carved from balsa wood on their dining room table 5 years ago. He remembered the night he had tried to show it to her. The memory bloomed, vivid and unwelcome. They were hosting a dinner party. It was the kind of event Catherine excelled at, a carefully curated guest list of important people, bankers, surgeons, a minor city councilman. Their home, a sprawling testament to her taste for expensive neutrality, hummed with a low murmur of self-congratulatory chatter. Liam, then a senior architect at a large, uninspired corporate firm, felt like a ghost at his own table. He was the quiet, unassuming husband who paid for the caterers and the ridiculously expensive wine. He had been on fire that week, possessed by the vision of the Aura project. It was more than a building. It was an ecosystem, a new way of thinking about urban density, with integrated vertical gardens, water reclamation systems, and a design that maximized natural light for every single resident. It was his soul rendered in blueprint and code. He had brought the small wooden model to the table, hoping, with a naivete that now seemed painful, to share his excitement. "What's that, Liam?" Richard Sterling, then just a friend of a friend and now Catherine's husband, had asked, a smirk playing on his lips. "Building a birdhouse?" Laughter rippled through the guests. Liam felt a hot flush of shame creep up his neck. He looked to Catherine for support, a silent plea. She gave him a look of pure, unadulterated annoyance. "Oh, honestly, Liam," she'd said, her voice light but edged with steel. "Put your toys away. Can't you see we have guests?" She turned to the table, a magnanimous smile plastered on her face. "You'll have to forgive my husband. He has these little artistic flights of fancy. It's his way of unwinding from the pressures of designing corporate office parks." The dismissal was absolute. She had not just belittled him, she had defined him for everyone at the table. He was not a visionary. He was a man with a hobby, a child with toys. The intricate model, a thing he had poured hundreds of hours into, was reduced to a little flight of fancy. He quietly picked up the model and took it back to his study. The door clicked shut behind him, and the sound of their laughter, muffled but still clear, was the sound of a door closing on his marriage. He hadn't known it then, but that single moment of public humiliation was the beginning of the end. Or, more accurately, the beginning of his new beginning. In that study, surrounded by his sketches and his toys, he made a silent promise to himself. He would build it, and he would build it on his own terms. Now, standing in his new office, the air thick with her greed, he saw that she hadn't changed at all. She still saw the model, now a perfected 3D printed marvel, and saw only the money it represented, not the dream. "Supporting my career?" Liam echoed, his voice soft, pulling him from the memory. He looked directly at Catherine, and for the first time, a flicker of something other than calm crossed his face. It was a profound, almost academic curiosity. "Tell me, Catherine, which part of my career did you feel you were supporting? The part where you told our friends my life's work was a Lego fantasy? Or the part where you threw my preliminary sketches for this very project in the recycling bin because they were cluttering up the kitchen counter? Abernathy's eyes narrowed. This was not the reaction of a guilty man caught in a lie. This was something else. He held up a hand. Mr. Calloway, anecdotal recollections of marital disagreements are irrelevant. The fact remains that $100 million asset was generated from work that began during your marriage. We have a very strong case for fraudulent concealment. Do you? Liam asked. He swiveled his chair slightly to face the lawyer more directly. The movement was slow, deliberate. Your case, Mr. Abernathy, seems to rest on a single, critical assumption: that the Aura project had any value at all during my marriage to Catherine. He paused, letting the statement hang in the air. I'm simply curious. Who exactly are you planning to call as a witness to establish that value? The question was a subtle shift in the room's power dynamic. It was a chess move Abernathy hadn't anticipated. He had prepared for denials, for arguments about timelines, for blustering counter-accusations. He had not prepared for calm, surgical inquiry. We can subpoena your project files, your early investors, your correspondence, Abernathy began, a list of threats. Please do, Liam said, the invitation so genuine it was unnerving. You'll find a long and well-documented history of rejection. You'll find that every major developer in this city turned it down. They used words like impractical, financially unviable, and an architect's pipe dream. For years, the Aura project had exactly one believer: me, and its monetary value was precisely zero. He turned his gaze back to Catherine, who was beginning to look uneasy. The triumphant certainty was beginning to fray at the edges. Isn't that right, Catherine? You more than anyone were convinced it was worthless. You made that abundantly clear time and time again. Her mouth opened, then closed. She was caught. To agree with him would be to torpedo her own lawyer's case. To disagree would be to lie, to claim she had always believed in the project, a claim Liam could disprove with a dozen painful memories, some of which had witnesses. Richard Sterling, her own husband, had been a witness to her scorn. The memory of the divorce proceedings surfaced next, another pillar in the foundation of this present moment. It had been a bloodless, sterile affair conducted in conference rooms that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Catherine's lawyer at the time, a different man with the same predatory smile as Abernathy, had argued her case with theatrical gravity. Catherine, he'd claimed, had sacrificed her own potential career to be a strategic partner in Liam's. She managed the home, curated the social life, and created the environment of stability that allowed him to rise at his firm. Her claim was that she was entitled to the majority of their assets: the house, the investment portfolio, a significant portion of his future income through alimony, because his success was, in essence, a joint venture. Liam, to his own lawyer's astonishment, had not fought it. He sat through the depositions, listening to this fictional account of their life together. He listened as Catherine described her emotional labor and the countless hours she'd spent cultivating connections on his behalf. He did not point out that her connections were with people who despised his creative work. He did not mention that the stability she provided was a gilded cage of crushing expectations and quiet contempt for his true passions. Liam, you can't just roll over, his lawyer, a pragmatic man named George, had pleaded in the hallway. She's taking you to the cleaners. We can fight this. We can depose those so-called friends and ask them exactly how they contributed to your career. No, Liam had said, his voice firm. Let her have it, the house, the money. It's just stuff, George. It's the price of my freedom. I just want it to be over. Clean break. But it wasn't entirely true. He did want one thing: a small, seemingly insignificant clause added to the final decree. George had argued it was unnecessary, but Liam had insisted. The clause was dense with legalese, but its essence was simple. Both parties would retain sole ownership of any and all speculative ventures, intellectual property, and artistic projects that held no demonstrable market value at the time of the divorce's finalization. When Catherine's lawyer reviewed it, he'd barely given it a second glance. Speculative ventures. Does he have some stock options we don't know about? He'd asked. No, George had replied honestly. He's an amateur painter, and he tinkers with architectural designs in his spare time. He just wants to ensure his hobbies aren't subject to future claims. The other lawyer had laughed. Hobbies? Fine, whatever. Leave it in. It's meaningless. Catherine, when told about it, had rolled her eyes. My God, he's worried I'm going to come after his sad little watercolors. Let him have his claws. It just proves how small he thinks. She had signed the papers with a flourish, the victor claiming her spoils. She took the house, the savings, the future income stream. She left him with his clothes, his books, his drawing table, and a portfolio of worthless designs. As Liam walked out of the lawyer's office that day, he felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in a decade. He wasn't walking away from a fortune, he was walking towards one. He had just purchased his freedom, and he'd used Catherine's own arrogance as currency. Back in the present, Abernathy was trying to regain control. Your ex-wife's personal opinion on your hobbies is not the determining factor. The law is. And the law will see a clear line from a marital-era project to a post-marital nine-figure payday. A judge will not look kindly on this, Mr. Calloway. Liam offered a small, sad smile. There are many things judges don't look kindly on, Mr. Abernathy. Deception is one. But wasting the court's time with a frivolous lawsuit built on a foundation of deliberate amnesia is another. He let his gaze rest on Catherine again. You want to talk about what a judge will think? Let's imagine for a moment that we are in court. You are on the stand, Catherine, and I have a simple question for you. During our divorce, your lawyer submitted a sworn financial affidavit on your behalf. Is that correct? Catherine glanced at Abernathy, a flicker of panic in her eyes. Yes, of course, we both did. And in that affidavit, Liam continued, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more intimate, more dangerous. You are required to list all known assets of the marriage. And you are also asked to declare any belief that your spouse is concealing assets of potential future value. Do you remember what you declared, Catherine? Do you remember what you swore to under penalty of perjury? The air in the room grew heavy. The polished concrete floor seemed to fall away. Catherine's carefully constructed confidence was not just cracking now, it was shattering. She looked at Liam, truly looked at him, and for the first time, she was not seeing the mild-mannered, pliable husband she had discarded. She was seeing a stranger, a man who had been playing a different game all along, by a different set of rules. And she had just realized, far too late, that she didn't even know how to play. The 18 months following the divorce were the most grueling and liberating of Liam's life. He moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment with a good northern exposure that was perfect for sketching. The opulence of his former life was gone, replaced by a Spartan functionality. He sold the luxury car Catherine had insisted on, bought a reliable used sedan, and poured every remaining penny into renting a small, dusty office space above a print shop. His days were a blur of methodical work. He woke before dawn, made coffee in his small kitchen, and was at his desk by 6. He didn't just revisit the Aura project. He disassembled it and rebuilt it from the ground up. He spent weeks refining the water reclamation system, consulting with hydraulic engineers online. He worked with horticulturalists to develop a list of plants that could thrive in the vertical gardens he envisioned, creating a complex, symbiotic ecosystem. He ran thousands of simulations, testing the structure's integrity against wind shear, seismic activity, and 100 other variables. This was what Catherine had never understood. She saw his work as art, a flight of fancy. She didn't see the science, the mathematics, the brutal engineering that underpinned the beauty. She saw a dreamer, not a builder. But Liam was both. He was an artist who spoke the language of physics, a poet who wrote in code. His evenings were spent not at lavish dinners, but in online forums and video calls with experts across the globe. He became a minor authority on sustainable urban design, not because he sought acclaim, but because he was obsessed with getting it right. He was building his case, not for a courtroom, but for an investor who was smart enough to see past the initial rejection letters from local developers. That investor appeared 6 months into his new life. His name was David Chen. He wasn't a real estate tycoon in the traditional sense. He was the head of a Singapore-based impact investment fund, a firm that looked for projects that were not only profitable, but also transformative. Chen had stumbled upon a paper Liam had written for a small, obscure academic journal on self-sustaining architecture. Intrigued, he had tracked Liam down. Their first meeting was a video call. Liam in his sparse office, wearing a simple button-down shirt, and Chen in a boardroom overlooking the Singapore Strait. There was no sales pitch. Liam simply walked him through the project. He didn't talk about profit margins. He talked about improving quality of life, reducing a city's carbon footprint, creating a community within a building. He spoke with the quiet, unshakable passion of a true believer. David Chen, a man used to slick presentations and exaggerated projections, was silent for a long moment after Liam finished. "Mr. Calloway," he said finally, his voice tinged with awe, "the fools in your city, they saw a building. I see the future." This was the beginning of a partnership. It wasn't a sudden windfall. It was a slow, deliberate process. Chen's firm provided seed money for advanced environmental and structural feasibility studies. They subjected Liam's designs to a level of scrutiny that would have terrified a less prepared architect. They sent teams of engineers, urban planners, and financial analysts to grill him. And Liam met every challenge, answered every question, and defended every choice with a mountain of data and research. He wasn't just selling them a dream. He was proving its viability with irrefutable logic. The quiet before the storm arrived on a gray Tuesday afternoon, 16 months after the divorce. An email from David Chen. The subject line was simple: green light. The board had given final approval. They were funding the entire project, purchasing the international rights, and partnering with Liam's new, one-man firm to oversee the first build in Singapore. The number attached was staggering, a figure beyond Liam's wildest imaginings. He read the email 3 times. There was no shout of triumph, no fist pump. Instead, a profound quiet settled over him. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city. All those years of being told his vision was a fantasy, a toy, a waste of time. All those nights spent alone in his study, while his wife entertained people who embodied everything he wasn't. All of it had led to this. He had been right. He had kept the faith, not just in his project, but in himself. He felt a single, hot tear trace a path down his cheek. It was not a tear of sadness, but of a deep, resonant release. He had won, not against Catherine, but against the doubt she represented. He walked back to his desk and placed a hand on the perfected, 3D printed model of the Aura Tower. He was ready for the next phase. He knew, with absolute certainty, that the news of his success would eventually reach Catherine. And he knew with that same certainty that she would come for her share. Back in the charged atmosphere of the office, Liam's question about the affidavit hung in the air like a toxic particle. Catherine's face, a mask of carefully maintained beauty, was finally showing the strain. Her perfectly applied lipstick seemed to be the only thing holding her expression together. I don't recall the specifics," she stammered, looking to Abernathy for a lifeline. The lawyer, however, was starting to look like a man who had walked into a minefield. "The declaration is standard procedure, Mr. Calloway. It is hardly a focal point. It is the entire point," Liam interrupted, his voice still quiet, but now imbued with an authority that was impossible to ignore. Because I do recall the specifics. I recall them very clearly. He swiveled his chair to face his monitor, his fingers moving deftly across the keyboard. He clicked a file, and a scanned document filled the large screen on the wall behind him. It was a page from their divorce settlement. Section 8, Financial Disclosures. Liam used his mouse to highlight a specific paragraph. This is the affidavit sworn by my ex-wife, Catherine. Let's read it together, shall we? He read from the screen, his voice clear and steady. I, Catherine Calloway, do hereby declare that I have no reason to believe that the opposing party, Liam Calloway, is concealing any known assets or possesses any speculative ventures or intellectual properties that hold a reasonable expectation of significant future value. He let the words echo in the silent room. He turned back to face them. You swore under oath that my projects had no expectation of future value. You swore that the very thing you are now claiming is a multi-million-dollar marital asset was, in fact, worthless. He looked at Catherine, his expression not triumphant but genuinely sad. The tragedy, Catherine, is that you weren't even lying. You truly believed it. You believed it with all your heart. Catherine was pale, her breathing shallow. That's just legal language. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything, Abernathy snapped, his frustration finally boiling over. He wasn't looking at Liam. He was glaring at his own client. The mask of the polished professional had slipped, revealing the furious, cornered man beneath. You signed a sworn legal document declaring his hobbies were worthless. You handed him the perfect defense on a silver platter. Did you not think to mention this to me? Mention what? That he used to doodle buildings? I didn't think anything of it. It was nothing, she shot back, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. It is now $100 million nothing, Abernathy roared, the sound shockingly loud in the serene office. Liam watched the exchange with a detached calm. The foundation of their attack had crumbled, and they were now standing in the rubble, turning on each other. This was the part he had not fully anticipated, the speed of their self-destruction. And it gets worse, Liam said, his voice cutting through their argument. They both froze, turning to look at him. He clicked another file on his computer. A new document replaced the affidavit on the screen. During the discovery phase of our divorce, your lawyer, Catherine, sent my lawyer a list of demands. One of them concerned my intellectual property. He highlighted another line. It was a formal request that Liam relinquish any claim on the copyrights of the professional photographs taken of their home, which Catherine intended to use for a magazine feature. But it was the second part of the clause that was devastating. Liam read it aloud. Furthermore, the party of the first part, Catherine Calloway, explicitly waives any and all current or future claims on the party of the second parts, Liam Calloway's, non-commercial artistic endeavors, including, but not limited to, architectural drawings and models, which both parties stipulate as having no commercial or material value. He looked at Abernathy. Your predecessor, the lawyer Catherine hired to represent her, drafted this clause. He wrote it. I simply agreed to it. He leaned forward, placing his hands flat on his desk. So let me summarize your position, Mr. Abernathy. You are here to claim a share of an asset that your client swore under oath had no future value, and that her own legal counsel put in writing was commercially worthless. So I ask you again, what case exactly do you believe you have? The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a checkmate. Abernathy stood motionless, his face a mixture of fury and disbelief. He was a shark who had just realized he'd attacked a submarine. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing to say. He had been so focused on the size of the prize that he had failed to examine the ground on which he stood. And the ground was a legal trap, laid years ago, baited with his own client's arrogance, and sprung with devastating precision. Catherine sank into one of the visitors' chairs, her posture utterly defeated. The Chanel suit, which had seemed like armor just minutes before, now looked like a costume she was swimming in. She stared at Liam, her eyes wide with a horrified understanding. All those times she had mocked him, all those little cuts and public humiliations, he had saved them. He had saved them all, and he had used them to build a fortress she could never breach. The quiet bomb had landed. It hadn't been loud or explosive, just a series of calmly spoken truths that had irrevocably altered the landscape of the room. Abernathy was the first to recover, his survival instincts kicking in. The goal was no longer victory, it was damage control. He slowly, deliberately began to pack his portfolio. Each document was slid back into its sleeve with a crisp, angry motion. He was sealing away his own humiliation. "Catherine, we are leaving," he said, his voice low and tight with fury. He did not look at Liam. To look at him would be to acknowledge the completeness of his defeat. Catherine didn't move. She was still staring at Liam, her mind reeling, trying to process the scale of her miscalculation. "But, Liam, you can't," she whispered, the words barely audible. "It's not fair." "Fair?" Liam's voice was gentle, but the question was a razor. "Was it fair when you told me my dreams were an embarrassment in front of your friends? Was it fair when you threw my work away like trash? Was it fair when you built a legal case for our divorce on the premise that my only value was the corporate paycheck I brought home, a job you knew I hated?" He stood up and walked to the window, his back to them. "I never hid anything from you, Catherine. You saw the work, you saw the passion, you saw the sleepless nights, you saw it all. You just didn't see the value. That wasn't a legal failure on my part. It was a personal one on yours." As he spoke, the door to the office opened. A man in an impeccably tailored dark gray suit stepped in. He was in his late 50s, with a calm, intelligent face and an air of quiet authority. It was David Chen, the visionary investor from Singapore. He held a thin document folder in his hand. "Liam, my apologies," David said, his voice warm. "I hope I'm not interrupting." The traffic was worse than anticipated. His eyes flickered briefly over Catherine and Abernathy, but he registered them with the same polite disinterest one might give to furniture. He did not know who they were, and his expression made it clear he had no desire to find out. His focus was entirely on Liam. The arrival of this man, so obviously powerful and at ease in Liam's presence, was the final, crushing blow to Catherine's reality. Her entire case was built on the idea that Liam was a nobody who had gotten lucky. But David Chen's deferential respect for Liam, the easy camaraderie between them, told a different story. Liam wasn't lucky. He was respected, he was powerful, and he had moved into a world so far beyond hers that she couldn't even comprehend its language. "David, not at all. Perfect timing," Liam said, turning from the window with a welcoming smile. He gestured to the two figures. "My ex-wife Catherine and her lawyer Mr. Abernathy were just leaving." The dismissal was so casual, so complete, he had reduced them to a mere footnote in his day. Abernathy grabbed Catherine's arm, his fingers digging into the expensive fabric of her suit. "Let's go. Now." But Catherine pulled away from him. Desperation had burned away her pride, leaving behind a raw, grasping need. The legal argument had failed, so she fell back on the only thing she had left, their shared history. "Liam, please," she said, her voice cracking. She stood up, taking a step toward him. The imperious woman was gone, replaced by a supplicant. "Think of all the years we had. Think of everything we built together. You owe me this. For us." Liam looked at her, and the sadness in his eyes was profound. He saw a woman so lost in her own narrative that she was trying to cash in a check from an account that had been closed for years. He saw a woman who still, even now, did not understand. The plea hung in the air, a pathetic echo of a life that no longer existed. For us? Liam repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them for the first time. He shook his head, a gesture of finality. Catherine, there hasn't been an us for a very long time. You made sure of that. He walked back to his desk, creating a physical space between them that mirrored the emotional chasm. David Chen stood by, a silent, powerful witness to the proceedings. His presence made Catherine's pleading seem even more desperate, more out of place. The life we built together, as you put it, Liam continued, his voice devoid of malice, but heavy with truth, was a life built on your terms, your friends, your ambitions for my career, your idea of success. I was a component in the machine of your life, the part that generated the income. The moment I tried to be anything more, the moment I showed you the part of me that was truly mine, this project, you rejected it. You mocked it. You told me to put my toys away. He gestured to the gleaming model of the Aura Tower. This toy is now my life. It's my work. And I built it not because of you, but in spite of you. I built it with the freedom I purchased when I let you take the house, the savings, and the alimony you claimed you deserved for supporting me. That was our transaction, Catherine. The divorce settlement was the price I paid to get my soul back. I will not be paying for it a second time. This was the moral mirror, and its reflection was brutal. He wasn't just refuting her claim, he was dissecting the entire history of their relationship and laying the diseased parts bare. Every word was a truth she could not deny. Abernathy, seeing his client's case and his own reputation circling the drain, made a final, desperate attempt to salvage the situation by ending it. "This meeting is over," he announced to the room, grabbing Catherine's elbow with undeniable force this time. "You will be hearing from my office, Mr. Calloway." "I sincerely doubt that," Liam said, his voice calm. "But you know where to find me." The threat was empty, and everyone in the room knew it. Abernathy was already calculating the cost of this disaster, the wasted hours, the damage to his reputation when word got out that he'd been so thoroughly and publicly outmaneuvered. He was furious, not at Liam, but at Catherine. She had fed him a narrative of a wronged woman and a sneaky ex-husband, but she had neglected to mention that she herself had provided the ammunition for her own demise. As Abernathy practically dragged her toward the door, Catherine looked back at Liam one last time. Her face was a ruin of confusion, anger, and a dawning, terrifying understanding of her new reality. Her marriage to Richard Sterling was predicated on the image of success and the comfortable financial cushion from her first divorce. This public failure, this revelation that she had no claim to Liam's fortune, would not be a private humiliation. It would be a social and financial catastrophe. Richard had not married a woman, he had merged with a portfolio, and that portfolio had just been declared worthless. They left. The heavy glass door of the office swung shut behind them, the soft hiss of the closer a sound of utter finality. The room was quiet again. The garish splash of their entitlement had been wiped clean, leaving behind the serene, thoughtful space Liam had created. He stood for a moment in the silence, the adrenaline of the confrontation slowly beginning to fade. He felt a profound sense of exhaustion, but also of peace. A chapter that had remained stubbornly open for years had finally been closed. David Chen, who had watched the entire exchange with the quiet observation of a hawk, stepped forward. He didn't mention what he had just witnessed. He simply placed a warm, firm hand on Liam's shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am now," Liam said, and he meant it. David smiled, a small, knowing expression. He held up the folder he was carrying. "Well then, shall we get to work building the future?" He gestured toward the conference table at the far end of the room. Liam looked at his friend and partner, at the folder that contained the next phase of his dream, and then out the window at the city sprawling below. The ghosts of the past had been exorcised. They had come seeking a fortune they felt entitled to, and had left with nothing but the bitter taste of their own folly. Liam had not sought revenge. He had simply demanded truth, and the truth had set him free. He nodded at David, a genuine smile spreading across his face for the first time that day. "Yes," he said, "let's." A few weeks drifted by, turning the sharp memory of the confrontation into a dull, distant echo. Liam immersed himself in his work, the demands of launching a project of Aura's scale consuming his every waking moment. He flew to Singapore for a week of intensive planning sessions, scouted locations for a potential North American build, and hired the first 2 employees of his new firm, a brilliant young structural engineer and a seasoned project manager. His life was full, forward-moving, and blessedly free of the drama that had defined his past. He had expected silence from Catherine's camp. He assumed the humiliation of their defeat would be enough to guarantee it. So he was surprised when his assistant informed him of a call from a Mr. Richard Sterling, Catherine's new husband, the man who had smirked at him across a dinner table years ago. Curiosity piqued, Liam took the call. "Liam, it's Richard," the voice said, attempting a tone of old money camaraderie that felt painfully forced. "Listen, I know things have been tense. I wanted to call, man to man." Liam remained silent, waiting. "Look," Richard continued, the false bonhomie quickly dissolving into undisguised irritation. "Catherine is a wreck. This whole thing has been a nightmare. It's all anyone is talking about. Abernathy is telling everyone she misled him, trying to save his own skin. It's a mess." "I see," Liam said, his voice neutral. "No, I don't think you do," Richard snapped. "This affects me. It affects our life. People are laughing. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" The raw, undiluted selfishness of the statement was almost breathtaking. Richard wasn't calling out of concern for Catherine's well-being or to apologize for the ambush in Liam's office. He was calling because his social standing had taken a hit. The accessory he had acquired, a wealthy divorcee, had turned out to be less valuable than advertised. "What is it you want, Richard?" Liam asked, his patience wearing thin. "I want you to be reasonable," Richard said, his voice rising. "Give her something, a settlement, a token. Call it a gesture of goodwill, something to shut everyone up. Name a price. Just make this go away." Liam felt a moment of cold clarity. He finally understood Richard, and by extension, he understood the world Catherine had chosen. It was a world where everything, including dignity, had a price tag. Problems weren't solved, they were paid off. "There is no price, Richard," Liam said, his voice firm and final. "This was never about money. You should know that. You were there at that dinner party. You heard her. You laughed with her. You are as much a part of this as she is. This is the world you both created. You can live in it." He paused. "Do not call me again." He hung up the phone before Richard could respond. He felt no anger, only a profound sense of pity for them both, trapped in their gilded cage of appearances. The call was a window into the consequences unfolding in Catherine's life. Liam could picture it perfectly. The strained silence in their cavernous, perfectly decorated home. The averted gazes and whispered conversations at the charity galas and country club luncheons. The friends who were suddenly too busy to return her calls. Her value in that world was tied to her perceived wealth and influence. With those gone, she was a ghost at their table, just as she had once made him feel like a ghost at his. It wasn't a punishment he had inflicted. It was the natural, inevitable outcome of the choices she had made and the values she had held. A month later, Liam stood on a podium under the bright Singapore sun. The groundbreaking ceremony for the first Aura Tower was underway. David Chen was beside him, along with city officials and a crowd of international press. Behind him, a massive banner showed a rendering of the completed building, a spiraling beacon of green and white against a blue sky. When it was his turn to speak, he walked to the microphone. He looked out at the expectant faces and thought of the long journey that had brought him to this stage. He could have used this platform to talk about his personal struggle, to subtly reference his vindication. But the thought felt small, petty. He was past that. "We are told that buildings are made of steel and glass," he began, his voice steady and clear, amplified across the bustling construction site. "But I believe they are made of more than that. They are made of ideas. The idea that a home can be more than just shelter. The idea that a community can thrive vertically just as it does horizontally. The idea that a building can give back to the environment more than it takes." He spoke about sustainability, about community, about the power of a single, persistent vision to change the landscape of a city and of a life. He didn't speak of revenge, he spoke of creation. As he finished his speech to a wave of applause, he caught David Chen's eye. His friend gave him a small, respectful nod. In that moment, standing thousands of miles from the life he had left behind, Liam felt completely and utterly whole. He was no longer the underestimated husband or the scorned artist. He was the architect of his own life, and the foundation was strong. The months that followed were a testament to that foundation. The Aura Tower rose from the ground, a marvel of engineering and design. It became a symbol of a new kind of progress, and Liam Calloway's name became synonymous with visionary architecture. His firm grew, attracting the brightest young talent in the field, all of them eager to work for a man who had proven that artistic integrity and commercial success were not mutually exclusive. One afternoon, a slim envelope arrived at his office. It was not sent by courier or registered mail. It bore a simple postage stamp and was addressed in elegant, familiar handwriting. It was from Catherine. He hesitated before opening it, a flicker of the old tension returning. He wondered if it was another demand, another desperate plea. But the envelope felt too light for a legal threat. He slid it open with a letter opener. Inside was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. The message was short. "Liam, I saw a feature on the Aura project in a magazine. It is beautiful, more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. I was wrong about everything. I am sorry, Catherine." There was no request for a response, no return address other than the postmark from a town he didn't recognize. There was no demand for money, no appeal for forgiveness. It was just an admission. Simple, devastating, final. He read the letter twice, then folded it and placed it on his desk. He felt nothing. Not the surge of triumph he might have once craved. Not the sting of old wounds. Not even pity. He felt a quiet, calm sense of closure. The apology wasn't for him, not really. It was for her. It was the sound of a person finally taking the first, painful step out of the ruins of her own making. Whether she would find her way to a different life, a better one, was not his concern. He had his own life to build. He looked away from the letter, his gaze drawn to the blueprints for the next Aura project planned for Vancouver. He picked up a pen and bent over the plans, his mind already moving, connecting lines, solving problems, dreaming of the future. The past was a closed book, and he had no desire to reread it. True worth, he reflected, is a quiet thing. It isn't measured in headlines or bank accounts or the envy of others. It's not found in the validation you seek, but in the value you create. Patience, integrity, and an unshakable belief in your own vision, these are the materials that build a life that can withstand any storm. Arrogance and pride are a weak foundation, destined to crumble under the slightest pressure. Catherine and Richard had built their world on that weak foundation. He had built his on bedrock. So what do you think? Does an apology like Catherine's, one that comes only after complete defeat, deserve forgiveness? Is her newfound humility genuine, or just the last resort of a person who has lost everything? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments below. What would you have done in Liam's place? Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you found this story of quiet vindication and earned success satisfying, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that explore the complexities of human nature. Until next time, remember to build your life on a foundation that you can believe in.